And as I was praying the rosary, like for the very first time, I remember just an overwhelming peace surround me. In a certain sense, looking back at it, I kind of felt Mary's presence. And it was through this encounter with a simple token of Catholicism that I began questioning my own belief as a Methodist. I mean, I was your typical kid who liked to mess around in the pews with my twin brother. He and I would mess around quite often, as you can imagine, sitting in the second pew in the church. So very visible to everyone, and I remember time and time again my mother having to separate us. 8th grade was the time in which, in the Methodist Church, that you enter confirmation. And so it was throughout that year that I was learning more intently about my own faith as a United Methodist. And it was in 8th grade that I began this desire to read Genesis to Revelation. And it was through that encounter with Christ in the scriptures that I began to want to believe. And that's where I would say my vocation, at least to ministry, began. My pastor at the time really took notice of me, my pastor in the Methodist faith, and it was him that pointed out to me, like, Jason, I think you have a call to ministry. And that was the sort of goal and aim in my life at, my freshman year up until my senior year of high school. I wanted to be a Methodist pastor. There was a friend of mine in high school that she witnessed to her own Catholic faith through the rosary. And at the time, as a Methodist, I'd never seen a rosary before, and there was a sort of a spiritual curiosity about it. I looked it up on Google to see what a rosary was. And what kind of drew me to the rosary at first was the meditation on Christ's life. You meditate on the life of Christ through the eyes of Mary. And so that was enough to draw me in. I wanted to add this to my own spiritual practice in addition to reading the scriptures. And it was through praying the rosary, through this encounter with a simple token of Catholicism, that I began questioning my own belief as a Methodist. A number of circumstances as I began to dive deeper into the Methodist faith, there were a lot of questions that I began having about Protestantism. And that kind of led me on this journey, this quest to find the church that Jesus Christ established. What convinced me to finally decide to join was after attending Mass at what is now my home parish, St. Boniface in Waukee, Iowa. I was struck by the beauty of the liturgy. I was struck by the reverence that was paid to the Blessed Sacrament of Jesus. Before walking into that church, I didn't believe in the Eucharist. When I walked out believing, the moment I want to remember is specifically watching the priest as he elevated the Blessed Sacrament, of elevating the host, of elevating the chalice, and saying the words of Christ. I recall the joy that welled up inside me, being able to recognize Jesus in the Eucharist. It was, for me, like the Emmaus account of the disciples who recognized Jesus in the breaking of the bread. And I want to remember that because as a priest, I'll get to celebrate that each and every time, and I want to bring that same joy, that same excitement each time I celebrate the sacrament. If it hadn't been for that moment, I wouldn't have become Catholic unless I encountered Jesus in the sacrament in that way. But my story doesn't really end there. I, obviously, with my desire to be a minister, to be a pastor, to preach and teach the Word of God, it still sort of resounded in my own heart. And having become a new Catholic, I didn't know what to do with it. That's sort of the beauty of seminary. You go there to discern more actively priesthood. And it was there that, God made it abundantly clear that he was calling me to be his priest. There have been a couple unique sort of experiences that I've had while praying in adoration of the Blessed Sacrament. And one of them that I recall, it was coming at a time when I was really questioning whether I should become a priest or not. And Jesus simply just told me, I've always called you to be my priest. Once I call you, I never retract my call. This is who you're meant to be. At the end of my earthly life, I want people to remember what they experienced through my ministry was not me. I want them to have experienced Christ and his love for them. When people think of Father Jason Lee, I want them to think I encountered Christ through that man.